Okay, almost ready to hit it. We got this, got some notes going here. Perfect. Got this new PC, man, and I just can't get used to the mouse pad, the way it works.
Oh, yeah.
Like, all right, let's let folks in. All right, welcome everyone. Good to have you back here at Piano Tech Radio Hour once again. Good to see those new faces and familiar faces as well. Joe Burros, good to see you. I feel like have you been, I feel like I haven't seen you hanging out in a while.
It's Burroughs.
I'm going to say Burros because yo
Russian.
hablo español.
No, it's Russian. It's changed to Russian. Don't say Burroughs.
What is it again? How do you say it?
Burroughs.
Burroughs. All right.
Yeah, it's a changed Russian name.
Okay, awesome. I have a changed Russian name actually.
Oh yeah? What was it changed from?
I believe it was Janowitz.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was Janowitz or Jankowitz. I always forget which one, but yeah.
Well, mine was Burash.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. It's not. It's got some character to it. Burash. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. It's good to have you here. Okay, so we're about to get started, and I'll give an intro to the program, and then we'll roll in with the guests that we have on cue for today. For those of you out there on Facebook and YouTube, of course, you'll be able to join directly to this Zoom meeting if you like. We'll add a link in about 15 minutes. I will also sign off of Facebook and YouTube and invite people to hang out in a more personal setting here on Zoom. So, but what will we be hanging out doing? Well, this is Piano Tech Radio Hour, and I will feature myself so we can see who's talking. And I will also add a spotlight for our guest today. I'll intro him soon. It's Piano Tech Radio Hour, and we gather here every Saturday since so many months. It's been a wonderful journey. We meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world. This includes folks like manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal here is to become better at our craft, helping each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. It's an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more about that at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. And today's guest is Larry Lobel. I'll tell you a little bit about him. Larry earned a Bachelor of Arts in Music from Hunter College in New York City, 1971. He went ahead to study piano technology with Robert Fairchild and Steve Fairchild Sr. In 1972. He joined the Ptg for 1 year. Then he went on to work for Yamaha dealers, rebuilding shops, Aeolian Corporation, International Piano Archive, and trained with David Stanwood. He's a licensed precision touch design installer. Finally, in the year 2000, Larry went ahead and rejoined the Ptg after a lapse of a quarter century. He passed his RPT exams on his first try. Congrats for that. He then served as San Francisco chapter secretary, VP, and president. Larry attended the Yamaha Little Red Schoolhouse, Steinway Academies in Oberlin, Ohio, and New York Factory. He also toured Chinese piano factories while chair of Ptg International Relations Committee. He has been an independent piano tech most of his career until age 60. He was offered the piano tech spot at the newly opened Green Music Center at Sonoma State University and for Santa Rosa Symphony. Larry is also a piano tech for Skywalker Sound, and he's always a regular audience member here too. So, Larry, welcome to the stage here at Piano Tech Radio. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Ethan. It's great to be here. I'm very honored.
Awesome. Yeah. And I know you took some time to, we were thinking about like getting some cameras on your scene and kind of putting something together, some tours of some of the local spots and that you got going on there. But we decided to put a slideshow together and chat through that. So I think that's going to be pretty fun. I'm going to just warm people up to you a little bit, maybe ask you a few questions, and then we'll hop over into the photos that you've got prepared. Sound good?
Sounds great. Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. So I read your bio and we alluded to a few things. So let's just dive in a little bit deeper on some of them. So, tell us about your PTG journey there, right? You kind of started and then got into some totally other stuff, and you did decide to return and get back into PTG and become more involved. Anything more to say there? What's the story? Were you a convert, or did you become estranged, or was it just a matter of getting busy?
It was both of those things. I joined the PTG at the insistence of my mentor, Robert Fairchild. And I went to some meetings and stuff. And I just felt like I don't belong here. I was an outsider, a beginner, a novice. I knew nothing. And it was uncomfortable. And then I had an unpleasant experience with one PTG member. And I generalized from that to condemn all of them.
Yeah.
I was young and foolish, and it was a dumb thing to do. And then I just worked independently. I had almost no contact with other technicians for those many years. I was just operating alone, and I was doing okay, not great. And then around 1998, I started working for a piano store, and they had copies of the Ptg Journal lying around, and I started looking through them, and I was very impressed by what I saw. And so I decided to go to there was a regional meeting not far from me in Santa Clara. So I went to the convention there, and I was just blown away by what I saw. The classes were incredible, and everybody was so professional and knowledgeable, and also welcoming, which was a little different than 25 years before. Another thing I noticed at the time I joined in the beginning was that it was kind of an old boys club. And unless you were admitted, you weren't privy to a lot of information and secrets. But that had all changed very dramatically. So I decided to join then. And I was determined to challenge the RPT exams and wanted to become an RPT. I didn't take them right away. I studied hard for several years before I challenged them, because I didn't want to face the humiliation of failing an exam after calling myself a professional technician for 25 years. So I worked hard, and I did manage to pass all the exams on the first try. And I felt like my career took off at that point. The contacts I made, friendships, referrals I got, the training I got was invaluable, and things just really took off from that point, and my success began from the time I rejoined the PTG.
Excellent. Well, that's a great story. Yeah. I was really appreciated it when I joined. I had the pleasure of being to some meetings in the Chicago chapter, although I hadn't joined at that time. But finally, when I was being a piano technician for several years, also not in the guild, but I did join when I moved to New York City, and that was a really great chapter to be part of. Just so many, the meetings are always, super interesting. Because we could bring in all sorts of interesting folks, and there are a lot of piano technicians in New York City compared to some areas where you get like 2 or 3 folks together, if that, so that was really fun. And I always say too, like, I feel like I was more nervous for my piano tech exams than I was for my PhD, my presentations for my PhD, my final dissertations, and, my presentations. So that'll tell you how the kind of pressure that we feel. What about, I'll just call a couple more things because I want to jump into your presentation, but you said that you work for, or we found that you have worked for Skywalker Sound. I don't know if you continue to work for them. That sounds like a really cool gig. That's that's something that comes out of George Lucas and Gary Kurtz hiring this guy named Ben Burt and having him be part of the sound for Star Wars and stuff like that. So yeah, any interesting stories or experience coming out of that?
There are, for sure, but I'm somewhat limited in what I can say because I have to sign non-disclosure agreements working at Skywalker. So I can talk about it in general terms. I was very fortunate.
Maybe I'll just make some statements and you could blink once for yes and twice for no or something.
Right.
All right, go ahead. Sorry.
One of my, a fellow San Francisco chapter member, Mark Schechter, had been the Skywalker technician for many years. And he asked me to stand in for him when he had to be out of town for various reasons. So I started out being his stand-in, and then he retired and recommended me to take over, which I did. And I've been working there ever since, still am. It's a terrific situation. You get experience and that are you can't get anywhere else. Great pianos to work on, terrific support. You get to work with outstanding artists. I've worked on several albums that have won Grammy Awards, and it's a high pressure job, demanding, but very exciting and rewarding.
Cool. Yeah. It's I was looking on the website. It's actually it looks like a beautiful property as well.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna just dive into one more topic before we pop in here, and that's because I alluded to it in the emails I sent out. I know we probably won't get into it too deep in your presentation, but you did have a chance to tour Chinese factories, and I don't know, that might have been a bit ago, but I'm curious what your experience was there. Any things that you learned or kind of surprises or learnings from those experiences?
Oh, yes, indeed. My trip to China was in 2010, and I went with a fellow chapter member, Ziwei Wang. We worked together a lot. We've done classes together. We did classes in China and at Ptg conventions, and we're going to be teaching a class at the upcoming one in Anaheim this summer on angel shot voicing. So he was my host for the China trip, and because of his insider knowledge, of course, he was born and raised in China. He acted like my personal concierge. He took care of all the hotel and airline bookings and all the travel arrangements, and I didn't have to do any of that stuff. And he also arranged for us to visit 4 different piano factories in different parts of China. We went to rebuilding shops. We went to dealerships. We were at the Shanghai Conservatory. It was just an outstanding experience, cram-packed with amazing stuff. And I didn't include it in my program today because it should be a separate program. And if you want to have me do that in the future, I'd be glad to. I have over 300 slides and movies from the China trip, and I think it would be interesting.
Cool. Yeah. It sounds like a good idea. Yeah. And you're reminding me, I was in Los Angeles back at the end of March, and I had the chance to check in with Tanya Regier, David Anderson's wife. So we hung out for a day, and that was very pleasant. And she pulled out these old photos that she had of when David visited China, and having a blast on that trip. So that was a cool opportunity to see those photos. But what do you say we get into your presentation you have prepared? We'll take a look. Of course, as always, we're open to questions as you present, and I'll monitor the chat and guide the conversation. But go ahead and bring up your screen share, and we'll take a look at what you got.
Okay, sounds good.
Do you still have that access? I got to give it back to you.
Right.
All right, you have screen share access.
Okay. Oops, where did it go?
There you go.
Okay. Okay, should be getting full screen.
Awesome.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yep. The presentation's like it's oh, there you go. It hopped into full screen now. We're ready to go.
Okay, so as I said, I was an independent technician working on my own, and at age 60, I was starting to slow down. I wasn't taking any new customers, and I wasn't traveling outside of my home county, and I was looking forward to easing myself into retirement. And then all of a sudden, I got this opportunity. I knew there was a new concert hall being built nearby called the Green Music Center that had been going on for several years, but it never even occurred to me to think about applying there because I figured somebody else had a lock on it already. And like I said, I was easing into retirement, so it wasn't even on my radar screen. And then I got a call one day from the director of production there, and he asked me to come tune a piano. So I did that, and I'll get into that a little later, but I just want to show you some of the situation there. So this is the northern entrance to the campus of Sonoma State University. It's a beautiful campus, pretty large, and they have about 8,000 students there. So I guess that would be kind of a medium-sized university. And they built a concert hall there. This is the northern quarter of the campus. You drive in and there's a very large parking lot, holds several hundred cars. And then across the road, this is the now called the Weil Hall, named after Sanford and Joan Weil, who donated a large sum of money to have it completed. Then there's an education building, which is for the music department of the university, is located there. And then there's a smaller concert hall called Schroeder here, which is named for the Peanuts character, Schroeder, because Charles and Jean Schultz were also large donors that helped make all this come about. And this, the large concert hall Weil seats about 1,400 people. And it also has a, the rear wall of it opens up to another seating area, outdoor seating, which can seat another 2,000 or 3,000 people. So they often have shows with the rear door open, and those people can see and hear the concert. They put up a large video screen over here and gigantic tower speakers on either side. And it's quite a great experience to see a concert from there. I actually prefer sitting outdoors and seeing shows up on the screen because they do close-ups and you can see artists, individual artists playing their instrument. It's a great experience. Okay, now we'll go on to the actual, this is an artist's rendering, obviously, an architect's rendering, I should say. And we'll go to live photos. This is the concert hall coming towards it from the parking lot, and the music department education building on the right. And there's a courtyard, there's the box office. And then on the other side, there's a 5-star restaurant there, Prelude, so that concert goers can enjoy a gourmet meal before or after the concert. And this is the colonnade, which you pass through to get to the courtyard on your way to the concert hall. This is the courtyard, and it's planted with 100-year-old olive trees, which were imported. And this is the back door of the concert hall that I was telling you that opens up onto the outdoor seating or amphitheater area. This is where the tower speakers go. And this is the lobby of the concert hall. The doors into the hall are located along here. There's a further back view of the outdoor seating area. And it's in Sonoma County, which is wine country, and there's beautiful hills surrounding the hall. There was a book published that tells the story of how the hall was built and how it all came about. And it's an interesting story. It started out as it was supposed to be just a small recital hall for there's a local Bach society. I think they perform mostly vocal pieces by Bach, and it was projected to cost $10 million. Well, a lot of people got involved and enthused, people outside that society that started it, people from the university and local music lovers. And the $10 million small recital hall turned into a $150 million large concert hall, which attracts performers from all over the world. So this was April of 2010, and it was the first time I tuned a piano there. I took a selfie because I felt like this was going to be a life-changing experience. And I'm tuning a Steinway D, which the concert hall had just purchased. It was used. It was a 2003 Steinway, and they had bought it in 2009, I think. So it was 6 years old, and it had been in a concert hall in Seattle, fairly heavily used. And they had replaced the hammers, but everything else was original. And I have the green arrow there to point out the casters. And casters are something that I wound up having to deal with a lot in this job. And I'm sure that's true for others who've worked in concert halls or universities. This piano came with, those are rubber casters, double wheels, rubber. I don't know if they're original from Steinway, but I can't imagine anyone would have put them on to replace whatever was original. But they were totally inadequate to support the weight of the piano, and they were flat on the bottom. So when you'd push the piano along the stage, it would go bump, 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 bump. And they look terrible. We call them the Walmart casters. So I was pushing to change them from the beginning, but one of the things I learned is that nothing happens quickly or easily when you're dealing with a large bureaucracy. So anyway, we'll come back to that later on. But so here I am doing my first tuning, which was sort of an audition, and the piano was up to pitch. It had been tuned frequently, obviously, as a concert piano, and I'm just tuning along, and I get to G2, and the first time I pulled on the tuning hammer, the string broke on a G2, which is one of these strings right there. And now, of course, I had replaced strings many, many times. I had strung entire pianos many times, but I had never had a string break in that location. Usually they're up in the treble or it's a bass string. This is one of the treble strings that goes under the bass strings. And at the same time that the string broke, it also pulled the hitch pin forward. So I had a double problem on my hands there. Now, here's the path of that string. It goes under the damper, obviously, under a couple of plate struts. Then it goes under the entire set of bass strings, under another strut, and underneath the plate itself for about 6 inches, and then it emerges in that oval hole to hook up to the hitch pin there. And remember, on a 9-foot concert grand, that string of G2 is about 7 feet long and then wraps around and goes back. So that makes it 14 feet long. So imagine trying to thread a 14-foot long string through that maze. It was impossible to do it myself. So I called my good friend Vladan Temer, who lives nearby and who's also a member of my Ptg chapter. And he came and helped me out. And we got the string back on, and we got a new hitch pin and got it all back together. So it was tricky and scary. And I figured, well, whatever chance I had of them wanting to hire me here, I just blew it. Even though it wasn't my fault, they wouldn't necessarily realize that. But as it turns out, it had no effect on my prospects there. So it was just made it for a fun story to recount. So let's see, I have to skip some slides here. And I'm going to go to the point where I'm going to do a comparison. I had the great opportunity of being present when they bought 2 new concert grands to replace this one. Everyone realized, and with a little bit of prodding from me, that this 6-year-old Steinway was, it was a little tired, and some of the performers who came complained that they felt like it wasn't projecting out into the hall. And I tried several things voicing it, and another technician did some lacquering of the hammers, which is not something I like to do, but nothing seemed to work. And so eventually the administration was prevailed on to get a replacement for it. And I had told them that if you want to have a world-class concert hall, which was their stated goal, you really should have a New York Steinway D and a Hamburg Steinway D. And to my amazement, they said, okay, we'll do it. And within less than a year, they had both of them. So I'm going to take you on a little tour of the New York and Hamburg Steinways that were bought brand new, both of them made within 6 months of each other. And it gave me a great opportunity to compare the two. And I thought that would be interesting for you guys to see too. And just very serendipitously, an article just came out in Larry Fine's Piano Buyer. This is from the latest issue, the Spring 22 issue, talking about the Steinway's plan to harmonize New York and Hamburg Steinways. It says that they came up with this starting in 1984. They've been trying to bring the two closer together so that they're as indistinguishable as possible. And it's an interesting article. If you want to read it, just go to pianobuyer.com. So these are the 2 Steinway Ds, New York and Hamburg, on stage in Weil Hall. This piano is a Steinway B, a 7-foot Steinway that they also bought at the same time. And that's the serial number of the New York Steinway, serial number of the Hamburg. They're about 500 numbers apart. And since Steinway makes about 2,000 pianos a year, they would have been made within 3 or 4 months of each other. Okay, we'll start at the bottom and work up. These are the pedals on the Hamburg Steinway. And if you're familiar with New York, you'll see this is quite different. the brass plate that affixes the pedal mechanism to the lyra goes underneath the lyra. So to remove this lyra to get access, you have to remove the lyra to get access to the pedals to do any work on them. That's on the Hamburg. On the New York, we have the very familiar brass plate on the front. And if you remove the 6 screws, you can just pull the whole pedal unit out after, of course, you've lifted up the pedal rods. And you can do a lot of work on the pedals there. If you get a loose pedal, which often happens to the sustaining pedal, the one that's most used, you can tighten up the screws and you can replace the bushings there. So I'd say the Hamburg is more aesthetically appealing, but the New York is more serviceable. So take your pick, which you prefer. Now this is to show what has been used as one of the fastest, easiest ways to distinguish between a New York and a Hamburg. The New York has the square cheek in front here. And I often tell customers and other people who ask me how you can tell a New York from a Hamburg, this is the most telltale giveaway, is that square front. And the Hamburg, of course, has the rounded cheek. In their plan to harmonize the two, in that Piano Buyer article, it says that New York is going to be going to the rounded cheek, the Hamburg method. And that probably has some advantages because it's less likely to chip or get bumped into things, less vulnerable. Okay, now we're looking at the fall board from the side of the New York Steinway, and you can see it has a hinged flap. They did this way back in the 1920s, and not sure why. I don't think it's a great design. It's got 4 of these hinges, each hinge with 6 screws. So you've got 24 screws that can get loose and cause rattles. The hinges get sticky, you have to lubricate them. It seems like it introduces a lot of vulnerabilities that really have no need to be there. And Hamburg never did that. The Hamburg still has a one-piece rounded fall board. This is the Hamburg, and it still has a lock and key, and turn the key and it locks both the lid and the fall board down in place. New York abandoned that quite a while ago. There are no locks on the New York. This is looking at the folded back lid. Not a big difference, but the Hamburg has 11 screws holding the lock strip down onto the lid. The New York has 6 screws with a lock strip and no lock. This is the lid lock, which not something you really need most of the time, but when the piano's being moved, it can be very crucial because it prevents the lid from falling open when the piano's on its side. And with some movers, that might be a problem, an accident could happen. So Hamburg still has a lid lock, New York does not. Now we're looking at the lid prop, or the top stick, as Steinway calls it. On the Hamburg, you have 3 lengths of lid props, so the lid can be held up at full height, medium, and short. And the medium is good for when the piano's being played with other instruments like string quartet, where you don't want the piano to overpower other instruments. And the very short stick is useful when you have a singer, maybe who doesn't have a really powerful voice or just feels overpowered by the piano. So those are useful to have. Take note of the attachment of the stick to the case. This is a very sturdy, stout brass C-shaped holder with the hinge pin going through it and all the lid sticks, and it's rock solid. It doesn't budge. It's a very solid attachment. And that's looking at it, the same thing, showing the 3 different lid props. Now here's the New York Steinway. Just the 2 options for how high you want to have the lid. And it's got a very simple, I think it's called a butt hinge. It's like a door hinge. They've had this has been the same on Steinways for over 100 years. And I have to say, it's not a very good attachment. Even on these new Steinways, the lid stick wobbles from side to side, and there's a lot of pressure on it, and the screws get loose and eventually get stripped out, and you always run into problems with those. And this is, again, the New York. This was a lid prop hinge that's offered by the supply houses. I bought one from Schaff, I think, with the intention of replacing the Steinway original one, but it would have required extensive modification to the lid stick, which I didn't think was a good idea to get into it. But this would be a good solution to that if you have any pianos with those lid stick problems, and you can adapt this to it. Just so you know, they're available. These are the music stands from the 2 pianos. Not a whole lot of difference there, just some design differences. I wouldn't say one is better than the other. They're both equally good. The dampers on the Hamburg Steinway have a satin finish, and the New York have a shiny finish, and they're kind of shaped slightly different. These come to more of a peak. The Hamburgs are more gentle. Again, one's not better than the other, just the design difference. Okay, now we're going to get into bridges, and this bridge is not from a Steinway. This is a bridge that I saw in a factory, and I wanted you to take note of the positioning of the bridge pin holes that were just drilled in it. Because, as many of you know, this is a very crucial part of the piano, and it really makes a tremendous difference in the tone quality of the piano. Having the bridge pins be perpendicular to the strings is important. So those 3 pins for each unison should be in a perfect line. And then also having them fall right at the break between the flat part of the bridge and the carved part that goes down is critical, because that's what determines the exact point of the speaking length of the string. And you want the speaking lengths of the 3 strings in a unison to be exactly the same to get the best tone quality. So if you look at some of these, they look okay, but here's one where they're obviously out of line. And this one, on this one, they're not quite centered on the line as they should be. By the way, is everybody seeing my cursor? I just want to check and make sure. Okay. And so this is in the factory where that bridge was made. And this is the worker who drilled those holes. And as you can see, she's just drilling the holes by hand with nothing to guide where they fall. And also the angle that the holes are drilled should be identical in every case, so that you wind up with a result like this, where each pin is parallel to all the others. And that angle is also crucial because the bridge pin acts as a clamp that holds the string down onto the top of the bridge. So the front pins are angled one way and the rear pins the opposite way. And those two clamp the string down so that the string stays in contact with the bridge for the best transmission of sound. So if those angles are slightly off, it's not going to work too well, not going to sound too good. Now, this picture is from one of the two Steinways in Wild Hall, and I'd say they did a pretty good job locating the bridge pins. And there's a backup view of the whole section. This is the other Steinway. One was New York, one was Hamburg. I'd say they're both pretty good. The pins are, for the most part, pretty parallel, perpendicular to the strings, I should say, and the distance between the strings should be equal. So the pins should be equidistant from each other. And they did a pretty good job here, I would say. This is the tuning pin field on one of them. And just looking at the heights of the tuning pins, those are all equal. The coils around the pins, the locations of the beckets. Again, I think the string is excellent on this and on the other one too. New York and Hamburg, I think they're both equally well done. This is the new 2013 New York Steinway that was bought, and the circle there is to show that it was signed by the pianist Lang Lang. Lang Lang was the first artist to perform in public at Wild Hall, and he sort of became the mascot of the Green Music Center. He's performed there several times, and so they asked him if he would autograph the plate, which he graciously did. When they decided to buy new Steinways, the original plan was to have myself and a faculty member and an artist or a performer go to the Steinway factory in New York and make a selection there. And we were all set to do that. And then at the last minute, we were told that only Lang Lang was going to go to Steinway and he would make the selection himself. That was a great disappointment to me, and I thought it was not a wise decision on their part, but they were more interested in the public relations aspect of it than having the piano judged by several people who would make their judgments from different perspectives, each of their inputs would be valuable. So anyway, Lang Lang chose the piano, signed the piano, and sometime after that, we had another artist came and performed, but it was a singer being accompanied by a pianist, and the accompanist saw Lang Lang's signature on the plate, and he wanted to add his signature. And we said, well, no, that's really an honor that we just reserved for Lang Lang. We don't intend to have other performers signing this piano. Well, he was adamant and insistent, and he intimidated one of the stage crew into getting him a marker, and he scribbled his signature on the plate, proclaiming, "I'm just as good a pianist as Lang Lang. My name should be here." So anyway, he did it. And then management was very upset about that. And I got a hold of some Steinway plate paint, which I ordered from Steinway. And with great difficulty and assistance from Louis Delbeni, who's here watching, I believe. Actually, Louis was the one who did it. I just got the paint. Louis did a really nice job of spraying over and feathering in the paint, so he managed to obliterate the other performer's signature on the plate. That performer actually showed up again a couple of years later and saw that his signature had been painted over, and he started making noise about doing it again, but this time the management was very firm and didn't allow him to do it. Where am I here? Okay, this is the Hamburg. Very much identical to the New York in appearance, New York, Hamburg. All the plates for Steinway are made at the O.S. Kelly foundry. I think it's in Indiana. Steinway now owns that factory. And at one time, you could see a big difference between the plate finishing between New York and Hamburg. And I understood that Hamburg put a lot more time into finishing the plates, to making them smooth and getting everything just right. But I would say that they have equalized them now, and they're pretty much identical. This is a front view. This is the Hamburg, and it's still distinguishable by the inner rim being lined with mahogany, while the New York is just painted ebony like the rest of the piano. They may have harmonized that by now. I don't know. Now we'll go under the piano, take a look at the beams and the underside of the soundboard and the ribs. They are very nicely finished. This wasn't always the case. And up until recent years, the beams would just be painted black, but now they're natural wood and everything's finished. They're smooth and very nice looking. And this is a comparison of the two. You can see they're pretty much the same. And the trap work. There's still some differences here, or at least there were in 2013. Again, I don't know what the situation is currently. But this, and by the way, this picture is distorted because I had to use the panoramic setting on my camera to be able to squeeze it all in. So obviously this is not curved, that's the camera that did that. And this is the underside of the Hamburg. There's a wooden framework around all the trap work, and I believe the purpose of that is just to protect it when the piano is being moved, because the trap work is very vulnerable to being damaged. So that's a good idea, I think. This is the New York trap work. There's no framework around it. There are some differences if you examine them closely. I think it's unfortunate that New York Steinway still has the shift bar, that long, heavy cast iron bar is supported or guided on one side by nothing more than a little 3/8 inch wood dowel. And I have found those broken out on many pianos. Hopefully they've changed that by now. Okay, now we're going to get into leg attachments and fall board removal. So when we remove an action, we have to remove, the first thing we do is remove the screws from under the key blocks. And for over 100 years, this was the screw that you'd find holding in the key block under all Steinway grands. And they are prone to being stripped out. Many times you come across that, and it's not always easy to repair, depending on how much the hole is enlarged. Or sometimes the screws are missing entirely and you have to hunt up one that's going to fit there. Again, not so easy. These kind of screws haven't been made for a long time. So that was the case on Steinways for over 100 years. And then at some point they replaced that with this, which is still a wood screw with a slotted head. And the only difference is there's a lot more threads. So instead of having to turn the screw 5 to 10 times to remove it, with these you have to turn it 10 to 20 times. It takes twice as long. Other pianos, this is from a Kawai, a 1970s Kawai. They had this Mickey Mouse ears head to the screw, which makes it very easy to remove, and it's very sturdy and stout. Yamaha came up with a great solution. I think these go back to the 1990s. This is a folding head to the screw. So after you pull this down to screw it in or out, makes it very easy to turn by hand, no screwdriver necessary. And then when you're done, it folds flat, so it's not protruding below the key bed. Beautiful design. Since the New York Steinway, the new one, still had a screw, and I considered it very essential in a concert piano to be able to remove the action quickly and efficiently. I took those screws to a welder and had him weld on some Mickey Mouse ears, and I sanded it and painted it, and that's what is in all the Steinways there now. I did that for all the concert grands that had slotted screws. I encountered some opposition from another technician who used to show up at the Green Center occasionally. He said, you can't change that. You have to go with the original equipment the way Steinway designed it or intended it. And they don't want things protruding from below the key bed. It's unsightly. The audience will see it. And I just went ahead and did it because it was unworkable to spend so much time turning the screws in a high pressure situation where I had to get the action out and get some work done as quickly as possible. Now, the Hamburg Steinway didn't have those. Hamburg had already changed. Where's that picture? Not that one. I missed it, but Hamburg already had, there it is, a butterfly type screw. And fallboard removal. There's several different systems for this. I'm sure you've encountered them. The Steinway system has not changed in 120 years. There are some technicians who recommend taking the whole fallboard out as a unit with the key blocks and the key slip attached. I've tried that. Somehow they never hang together. If I lift it out, the key blocks fall off the fallboard, the whole thing clatters to the floor. And so I've never used that successfully. And I'll talk about that a little later too. Leg attachments. Hamburg has gone to a different attachment, and New York also is in compliance with this now. So the older system was these kind of leg locks, which were used on Steinway grands since time immemorial. And the leg locks were a very solid, nice connection between the leg and the piano, but they depended upon you get the leg in place, and then it has to be the leg has to be pushed outwards for the locks to grip each other. And you do that by hitting the leg with a rubber mallet, hopefully a rubber mallet. And then these wooden buttons, or toggles, as Steinway calls them, are just rotated outward. They have a cam shape on one end, and it's the pressure of the wood against the leg that keeps the locks locked and the leg in place. Well, those become worn over time, and the pressure that they're subjected to can strip out the screws. So it's a very weak system, in my opinion, that is vulnerable to damage and disasters. And they use this system on their smaller grands. On the concert grands, slightly different. They had, this is a removable wooden wedge here. So you would knock that out or in. But again, it puts a lot of pressure on the screwed in block. And I've seen those damaged, the screws stripped and damage to them. And again, just very vulnerable. So thankfully, about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, Steinway went to this system. It's again a locking system, but where one disc is on the key bed and one is on the leg, and they lock into each other. But this time there's a hex screw going through one disc and into the other. And that's a very sturdy, solid system. And that's now used on both New York and Hamburg Steinways, thankfully. This is a little aside, getting back into casters. You see this notice is posted under the key bed at the top of the leg. And it's warning people to make sure they lock the casters. Well, who's going to look up there under the key bed when they're locking casters? I don't imagine anyone will see it. So, and it is a problem that people forget to lock them when they move the piano into position, and they forget to unlock them when they want to move the piano away. And I've had casters damaged from doing that, and it can cause havoc with the legs and the locks. So I put my own notices right on the caster where the locks are turned. I had to keep it short, and I figured out that if you just tell people not to turn it more than twice, that's the best advice you can give, because many times people make them so super tight that it's almost impossible to release them. I've had to use hammers to release them because people tightened them so much. And then again, when they're loosening them, they just keep turning and turning, and to the point where this part of the caster actually falls out of the hole. So
Hey Larry, I'll cut
Okay.
in here. We're about at the hour.
Oh,
And so we could go over like a minute or two if you want to ease out. And I find this really fascinating. I've never compared the two pianos in such detail before. So this is really cool. We can, depending on how much you have, remaining, we can have you back with all kinds of stuff. But yeah, why don't I let you wrap it up for a minute, and then I'll come back up and wrap it up officially. Cool.
okay, great. Thank you.
Continue.
What's that?
Right. We're gonna go for 2 hours. Yeah. Was that who said that? Was that
That
Carl?
was Carl.
Yeah. It's very cool. It's very cool.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like it. Well,
But yeah.
I didn't get anywhere near as deeply into it as I thought I would. But I have a lot more material. So depending on it, how much you want to get into it, I have tons of stuff. But I'd be happy to come back for another hour if people want me to, and do some more of it.
Cool.
So I'll let you take it from there, Ethan.
Okay, cool. I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to wrap up with, but that sounds great. So we'll remove your screen share real quick and the options. Cool, sharing stopped, and then I'll bring myself back. There I am. And all right. Well, Larry, you've been such a loyal participant for so much time, and it's so cool to have you come up and share what you have with the rest of us. So thank you so much for this. And I'm seeing some really great comments in the chat in appreciation, especially helpful to rural tuners who don't run into some things, enlightening presentation, and wanting you to come back for more. Great, please return. Yes, please. Yeah, so we got a lot of good feedback. I'm sensing a series here, so we'll put you back on the calendar as soon as we can, and then we'll harken back to this. This is a good reason for people to subscribe, so they can go back and check out the previous session and see where you left off. But okay. I'll walk us out here officially. First, is there anything else you want to say before we sign off officially to the crew, or send them anywhere to check anything out, or tell them how to live their lives or something?
Well, I'd be glad to come back and do more. Maybe I can move it along a little faster next time and get through more of what I have. But I'm glad to see in the comments section that people enjoyed it and thought it was worthwhile, and I'd be happy to come back again.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and it's kind of one of your first times you're doing a Zoom presentation, so we appreciate you giving it a shot. I think it's not always obvious to the people who are observing, but it's a big deal for a lot of people, especially in the piano tech industry, which is full of Luddites by definition. So we're just like work on these, technology that is, updated only to a degree, right? And so we kind of enjoy that as piano technicians. And so I always appreciate taking any of us technicians any steps further into the world of online learning and presentation and stuff like that. So we're really happy that you're doing that.
Well,
so
you Lamassed me into it very nicely.
There you go. Awesome. All right. So we've reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. Thanks to Larry for joining us today. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction for piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that joined today by signing up for this session individually, can make your life more convenient. You could subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour. It's just $16 a month. That's just about $4 per session. And you'll get the recording of each session in our member area. You'll automatically get registered, so it's not hard to find each week. Of course, it's always free. If you want to subscribe to our email newsletter, you'll find out how to register each week. But you'll automatically register if you're fully subscribed and a paying member. And you can sign up for that at www.pianotechniciansmasterclass.com/PTRH-direct access. That link should be in the chat, as well as a place for you to provide feedback for this session. And without further ado, I think we'll sign off for the day and let everybody enjoy their Saturday. All right. Have a good one.